yesterday Shilpa you didn't read. Today Shilpa and Sonki will read. New chapter.
Shall I read?
Yes, you can start.
A new chapter. A new chapter, memory, ego, and self-experience.
That's right.
Here is God, the mind, in its dream experience again and again, what once was experienced, what has been seen, and what has not been seen, what has been heard, and what has not been heard, what has been experienced and what has not been experienced, what is and what is not. All it sees, it is all and it sees. Prasanna Upanishad. To dwell in our true being is liberation. The sense of ego is a fall from the truth of our being. Maha Upanishad. One in many births, a single ocean holder of all streams of movements, sees our hearts. Rigveda. Shall I continue? Or
Yes, you can. The direct
the
self.
direct self-conscious of the mental being that by which it becomes aware of its own nameless and formless existence behind the flow of differentiated self-experience of its eternal soul substance, behind the mental formations of that substance of itself behind the ego, goes behind mentality to the timelessness of an eternal present. It is that in it which is ever the same and unaffected by the mental distinction of past, present, and future. It is also unaffected by the distinctions of space or the circumstances. For if the mental being ordinarily says of itself, I am in the body, I am here, I shall be elsewhere. Yet, when it learns to fix itself in this direct self consciousness, it very soon perceives that this is the language of its changing self experience, which only expresses the relation of its surface consciousness to the environment and to externalities. Distinguishing this, detaching itself from this, it perceives that the self of which it is directly conscious does not in any way change by these outward changes, but is always the same, unaffected by the mutations of the body or of the mentality or of the field in which these move and act. It is in its essence featureless, relationless, without any other character than that of pure conscious existence, self-sufficient and eternally satisfied with pure being, self-display. Thus, we become aware of the stable self, the eternal M, or rather the immutable is, without any category of personality or time.
Yeah. Okay. So here in this para, Shendra is explaining the difference between the Jivatman, that is the individual soul, when it is in the body and when it is not in the body but outside the body. So these are the two. When it's in the body mind life, it is immersed in Prakriti, or it is outside in the self, outside, above the mind, in the eternal, nameless, featureless self. So that's what is discovery. So we'll have a look at all the words and we'll identify what he's saying, which level he's talking about. Then it becomes clear to us what he's saying. So the direct self-consciousness of the mental being. So at our mental level, are we conscious of the mind? By the mind, does it know itself or does it know things outside? Okay, our mind is seeing things in the physical world and it is seeing objects in the outside world, and that is not self-consciousness, but that is other consciousness. Okay, it is seeing something which is not itself at our level. Okay, but to a certain extent, it also sees within itself, but not the mind is not capable of seeing itself unless it goes out of itself. The consciousness has to go out of the mind because the mind can see the body. Okay, the body is part of it, the entire being, but it can see the body. It can also see to a certain extent the emotions. It can also see the thoughts when they have occurred. After they have occurred, it can see the thoughts. But if it is capable of seeing the thoughts when they are occurring, okay, when they are occurring, it sees the thoughts as something separate from itself. Normally, when we have thoughts, we think, I am thinking. There is a identification between the thought and you. You are thinking. But if the mind has the capacity to look at its own thoughts while they are happening, then what happens? There is a thinker and there is a thought. So there is a separation between the two. And that is the experience of the self-consciousness that Sridhar is talking about. It knows itself. It can become conscious, and self-consciousness of the mental being is the self. You are in a consciousness where you see everything absolutely in a colorless and in a correct view of things. We are not using our senses at that time. Okay, we are using only, you are identifying yourself with your own consciousness. So that's what is meant by self-consciousness of the mental being. That by which it becomes aware of its own nameless and formless existence behind the flow of a differentiated self-experience. Let's look at what he's saying. He's saying it can become aware of its own nameless and formless existence. Which is this one? Obviously the self. Because it is nameless in this sense that there are no features and there is no form. It is formless and it is everywhere. It is self-existent and it is this self. The self is, remember, static, featureless, immutable, immortal, eternal. That is the self. So here when Sridhar is talking about the nameless and formless, very clearly he is talking of the self. The self, which is a consciousness which you attain outside your body-mind life, and you are watching your body-mind life, and you are absolutely at peace and calm. Nothing is affecting you. Okay? So that's it. And where is this consciousness? It is behind the flow of a differentiated self-experience. First of all, there is a flow. In the self-experience, there is no flow. It is absolutely static condition. So when he speaks of the flow, he is talking of the soul in the body-mind life. Okay, very clearly. Okay, so and the flow. And what is the nature of that flow? Differentiated self-experience. We have not one consciousness which is absolutely featureless, but we have got differentiated. That means the one becomes a many. So differentiated self-experience. We can see within our self-experience. Self-experience to a certain extent, it can have two meanings. Okay. The first meaning is individually, you can see within yourself that there are many types of emotions, there are many types of actions that can be differentiated self-experience. But it can also mean at the universal level, it can be the different individuals, differentiated. There, three of you are there and I am the fourth one, and we are all different, but essentially we are the same. So when you go to the self, you see that we are all one, but it is differentiated. You are different, I am different, but essentially we are one. That is the experience that you get when you go to the self. Okay, that's what he's saying. Behind the mental formations of that substance. Note interestingly that your body and others' bodies, Shilpa's and Sunki's and mine, bodies are all different. So, formations of that substance, okay? The substance is the flesh and blood, and that's the substance. And it's all different. They are different formations of itself behind the ego. So ego is when you are in the body-mind life, okay? That's the ego. And that is where the many are there, that differentiated. And when you go up outside, then you have the self-experience, which is one, immutable, and it is featureless. Some is using the words nameless and formless. Okay, it's infinite. And you realize that you are immortal. And all this is outside the ego. Some is using the word behind. Behind, he has used the word twice. Behind the flow of the differentiated self-experience and behind the ego. goes behind mentality to the timelessness of an eternal present. So here use the word behind 3 times. That means all you leave the body, mind, life and either behind or above. Okay. You could have used the word above also for the self, consciousness of the self. Behind is more the consciousness of the psychic being. Okay. So he's saying when you are in the body, you have an ego and you are having the experience of many things outside in the physical world as well as your own. But when you are in the self, it becomes nameless, featureless, absolutely without, it is only one. Okay. It's an immutable static condition. That's what he's saying. It is that in which it is ever the same and unaffected by the mental distinction of past, present, and future. When you are in the body, mind, life, your past is different from your present and it is different from the future. But when you are in the self, the past, present, and future become like a picture. You are looking at the picture, oh, this is past, this is present, this is future. You are seeing all the 3. That's why forecasting is possible when you are in the self. Okay. But it depends on individual experiences. Not everybody has got that, but it is possible to get that. Then unaffected by the mental distinction of past, present, and future. It makes no difference to you. But in our condition, the past makes a difference, present makes a difference, future makes a difference. It is also unaffected by the distinctions of space and of circumstance. Nothing affects you. That's what he's saying basically. The world goes on, your body, mind, life also is going on acting, emoting, thinking, but you are not. Your consciousness has come out of the body, mind, life and is watching, and it is absolutely static condition, not affected at all by the thoughts and the emotions and the actions. He is just watching. And he says that if the mental being, our normal being, ordinarily says of itself, I am in the body, because you identify yourself with the body. I am here, I was there, I shall be elsewhere. You are identifying yourself with the body. Today the body is here, tomorrow the body will be in school, day after tomorrow it will be in the ashram. So, yet when it learns to fix itself in this direct self-consciousness, it very soon perceives that this is the language of its changing self-experience, which only expresses the relations of its surface consciousness to the environment and to externalities. So, when you are identified with your body, mind, life, there is movement and you are conscious of past, present, and future, and you are only talking of level 1 experiences. Level 1, yourself and the physical world. There is an interaction between the physical world and yourself. But when you are in the self, there is no interaction. You are absolutely calm and quiet and nothing is disturbing you. Okay. That is the language of the changing self-experience. There is an image which explains this also in the Gita. It is like the sea, which is calm and infinite, and all the rivers that are going into it merge into it. But it makes no difference to the sea, which remains the same. Even the biggest rivers, when they are going into the infinite ocean, the ocean remains absolutely the same. So the image means that when emotions and thoughts enter into you, into the body, mind, life, you are absolutely unaffected by everything. That's the experience of the self. This whole paragraph is describing the difference between the self and the difference between the ordinary mental experience when we are identified with our body, mind, life. Okay? So very soon it very soon perceives that this is the language of the changing self-experience. Changing self-experience, the physical world, and your identification with body, mind, life. Because when you are in the self, there is no change. Very clear. Changing self-experience, which only expresses the relations of its surface consciousness. Which is the surface consciousness? Your mind, your vital, and your body. To the environment, to the world, and to externalities. You are experiencing the physical world and you are interacting. The world is interacting with you, you are interacting with the world. Distinguishing these detaching itself from these, it perceives that the self of which it is directly conscious does not in any way change by these outward changes, but it always the same, unaffected by the mutations of the body or of the mentality or the field in which these move and act. Now, we'll take a look again exactly. We'll have to use understand each word. So, very clearly, he is repeating the experience of self in different words, and it's very interesting because then you get a clearer picture. You are in the self, there is no movement, and when you are in your body mind life, there is movement and there is changing experiences. But there in the self, no change at all. It's a static condition, and you are watching. So, distinguishing what? Level 1 and level 2, the body mind life and the self. Distinguishing these, detaching itself from these, it perceives. Distinguishing itself means the physical world and the individual body mind life. You are distinguishing between them. It perceives that the self of which it is directly conscious. Now, directly conscious, what does it mean? Directly conscious means without any instrumentation. Because when we are experiencing the physical world, you are getting knowledge of the world indirectly. You are using instruments, you are using senses, which are giving you knowledge of the physical world. That is indirect knowledge. But when you are in the self, it is a consciousness that identifies itself with the condition in which it is there. So that is direct. No senses. The senses are all there in the body, mind, life down below. Okay, but you are in the up on the mountain top, and you are not using your senses. They are all below. You have left your instruments of knowledge below, but is always the same. Again, immutable, eternal, without movement, unaffected by the mutations of the body or of the mentality or of the field in which these move and act. So, mutations of body, your own, or of the mentality, your thoughts are going on changing, or also of the field in which these move and act. So, this whole phrase of the field in which these move and act is the physical world. So, but he is using this using why? Because he is giving a clear picture. It helps you to see the way he is looking at. The world is nothing but the field in which you are moving. And what are these? He's using the word these. So which are these? Your body, your vital, and your mind. Okay. He's not saying you are moving. He's saying these are moving. It is in essence featureless, relationless, without any character than that of pure conscious existence, self-sufficient and eternally satisfied with pure being, self-blissful. So, the word self-sufficient means that it doesn't depend upon anything. Very clear. Okay? Self-sufficient. Are we self-sufficient? No. We can't exist without the universe. We can't exist without the all the things that the physical universe is demanding. So we are not self-sufficient. We are self-dependent on the universe. So self-sufficient means it doesn't need anything. It exists by itself. And eternally satisfied. There is no desire. There is no wanting. You are absolutely static condition. You are desireless. And if you are desireless, you are satisfied with what you have. And what do you have? You have the self, which is infinite and always blissful. So there is complete satisfaction. Thus, we become aware of the stable self. Again, he uses the word stable, no movement. The eternal am. Now, that's it. I told you one, there is a book written by Eckhart Tolle. You may have heard of him. He's a German fellow who experiences self. And he goes about all over the world giving lectures. He also came to Pondicherry also. And in one of the hotels here, he gave a talk to which many of our ashramites also went. So he has written a book called The Power of Now. Because when you are in that experience of the self, there is no past, present, and future. It's an eternal am. You just exist. Okay. or rather the immutable is, without any category of personality or time. Now, what's the difference between am and is? Am is you are conscious of your individuality. I am. The word I am goes with I. Okay. So you are conscious of the, but you can also be not conscious of your ego, okay, and you may feel yourself to be everywhere. Then it becomes the is. It is featureless and it is something neutral. It's not individual anymore. That's why he's saying, or rather, immutable is, without any category of personality or time. So we looked at each word and identified each word what we see. So the whole para is saying nothing. When you are identified with your body, mind, life, you are in the normal consciousness of the ignorance. You are seeing the many, there is movement, and you are identified with your body, mind, life. But when you are in the self, you have come out of the prison house of body, mind, life, and you are in a static condition. There is no change. You know that you have always been, and you will always be eternal, immutable, infinite, formless. Infinite means formless. Formless means infinite. Okay, that's what he said. Now, we can go to the next para. But this consciousness of self, okay? I wonder what happened to Yasmin. She's not there today. Maybe she forgot to tell us that she had an operation, I don't know, surgery. Anyway, Sunki, you read? Yesterday you didn't read.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes.
But this consciousness of self.
This consciousness of self, as it is timeless, so is capable also of free regarding time as a thing reflected in it and as either the cause or the subjective field of a changing experience. It is then the eternal I am, the unchanging consciousness on whose surface changes of conscious experience occur in the process of time. The surface consciousness is constantly adding to its experience or rejecting from its experience, and by every addition it is modified, and by every rejection also it is modified. Although that deeper self, which supports and contains this mutation, remains unmodified, the outer or superficial self is constantly developing its experience so that it can never say of itself absolutely, I am the same that I was a moment ago. Those who live in this surface time self and have not the habit of drawing back inward towards the immutable or the capacity of dwelling in it are even incapable of thinking of themselves apart from this ever self-modifying mental experience. That is for them their self, and it is easy for them, if they look with detachment at its happenings, to agree with the conclusion of the Buddhist nihilist that this self is in fact nothing but a stream of idea and experience and mental action, the persistent flame which is yet never the same flame, and to conclude that there is no such a thing as a real self, but only a flow of experience, and behind it, nihil. There is experience of knowledge without a knower, experience of being without an existent. There are simply a number of elements, parts of a flux without real whole, which combines to create the illusion of a knower and knowledge, and the known, the illusion of an existent and existence, and the experience of existence. Or they can conclude that time is the only real existence, and they themselves are its creatures. This conclusion of an illusory existence in a real or unreal world is as inevitable to this kind of a withdrawal as is the opposite conclusion of a real existence, but an illusory world, to the thinker who, dwelling on the immobile self, observes everything else as a mutable not self. He comes eventually to regard the latter as the result of a deluding trick of consciousness.
Yeah. He is describing the experience of the self, where you can have several types of experiences. This is a Buddhistic experience of the physical world as unreal, and the reality is a blank. That's what he's saying. So we'll have a look at what he's saying. We have got 15 minutes, so we'll try and look at this. I'm reading each sentence. But this consciousness of self. So which one is he talking about? Level 2. He's talking of the spiritual consciousness in the self. You are not identified with your body, mind, life, and you are eternal, infinite, and featureless, and you are static, and you know yourself. You have always existed in the past, and you will always exist in the future. Because it is timeless. There is no time there in the spiritual planes of consciousness. No time, no space. And you are everywhere. You are omnipresent. So this is the consciousness of self. And he's explaining, as it is timeless, so is capable also of freely regarding time as a thing reflected in it and as either the cause or the subjective field of a changing experience. You see, the physical world is throwing its images on your consciousness, and it is something fleeting, and it is, you experience the physical world as something full of movement, okay? Movement and features. It is then the eternal I am. So you are conscious of your individuality, which has become eternal. Okay? And that individuality is not the ego. It is the real consciousness. It's a real consciousness of the self. Okay? Your divine element in you. You have gone up into the spiritual planes of consciousness. Level 2. So, the unchanging consciousness on whose surface changes of conscious experience occur in the process of time. I remember there was one colleague of mine who had experience with the Brahman consciousness, and I had asked him, you don't get thoughts? So he told me, he said, no, thoughts are there, but they're not in me. They are outside. I'm watching the thoughts, and they are just like small ripples on the surface of the ocean. I am above and I'm watching these. Okay, so that's what Sanjay is explaining here. It is the eternal I am. Note the word eternal. You know yourself to be immortal. I am. The consciousness has become, it's not the ego, it's the real consciousness in you. Okay? Your real individuality. It's different from the ego. Ego limits you to the body, mind, life. The I am, the self, does not limit you at all. You are everywhere. There is no location, but you are conscious of yourself as everywhere. Okay. So again, if you find it difficult to understand this, we always use images, no? So take this grain of salt. Okay, the grain of salt is the ego, and you've got a form, shape, color, weight. That's your identification with body, mind, life. But you throw that into the water, the form, shape, color, size disappears. But the saltiness, which is the essence of you, your soul, is everywhere. The salt now, saltiness is there everywhere in the universe. Okay, so that's what is meant by the eternal I am as an unchanging consciousness on whose surface changes of conscious experience occur in the process of time. You are outside time and you are watching, and in time down below, you are seeing all sorts of changes are occurring. Okay? You are eating, you are sleeping, you are talking, you are having thoughts, you are having emotions, you are moving from one place to another. All these things you are watching. You are not doing, you are watching. The surface consciousness is constantly adding to its experience and rejecting from its experience. Very clear. Normally, when we are there in our normal consciousness, every experience that we have, it is adding to our knowledge. It's very clear. Okay. Whatever you are experiencing, it makes you grow because you are getting more information. So surface consciousness is constantly adding to its experience. But there are certain experiences also which you reject. Okay. You have had a bad spat with one of your colleagues. Okay. They had a little quarrel. So you reject it. You don't want it. Or even rejecting from his experience means, suppose a bit of anger comes into you, you reject it. You don't accept everything. You accept pleasant things and you reject the unpleasant things. But that also, it is and gets modified. So you are changing all the time and you are also being modified. Okay? So everything that you accept and everything that you reject is changing you because you are in the level 1. There is no change at level 2. So note interestingly how it is modifying. Your body, you seem to think that the body is the same, but every instant the body is changing. Not only when you are eating, obviously your weight will go up, your substance will change, and you are also rejecting matter in the morning. Okay, that also is changing you. But even your emotions are coming in and your thoughts are coming in. There is change constantly. Your body mind life is constantly in change. That's what Swami is saying. But there is no change in the self. You're just watching all these things and you are being modified. Although that deeper self, the Brahman consciousness, which supports and contains this mutation, remains unmodified, the outer or superficial self is constantly developing its experience so that it can never say of itself absolutely, I am the same that I was a moment ago. You are not. Your body is changing. Every time you breathe, you are adding oxygen and maybe even other gases into yourself. So you are changing. Your vital also is changing. You are rejecting certain things and accepting certain things. Mind also. Okay. It can never say of itself when you are identified with the body mind life that I was the same yesterday what I was and I will be the same tomorrow. It can't say. Okay. Only the self can say that. I am what I was and I am what I will be, but I am eternal and changeless. That's the divine element in you. Those who live in this surface time self, that's 90% of humanity, like us, and have not the habit of drawing back inward towards an immutable or the capacity of dwelling in it, are even incapable of thinking of themselves apart from this ever self-modifying mental experience. We are this huge sentence means nothing but you are identified with your body mind life. You think that you are the body, you are the vital, and you are the mind. They cannot think of themselves as something separate from the body mind life. That is for them their self. And it is easy for them, if they look with detachment and its happenings, to agree with the conclusion of the Buddhist nihilists. And what are the Buddhist nihilists saying? That this self, now he is using the word self in the sense of body, mind, life. Okay. In fact, nothing but a stream of idea and experience and mental action. The persistent flame, which is yet never the same flame, and to conclude that there is no such thing as a real self, but only a flow of experiences, and behind it, nihil. So they interpret the self as a nihil. Why? Because it is featureless, changeless, immortal, ever the same. So, and it is pure. So there is no feature at all. So it's a nihil. It's a question of words. Okay, it's a question of words. So this is what the Buddhists say, that everything that is there in the physical world is changing and it is never fixed. So it's like a river which is flowing. The river which is flowing, you are looking at the river and saying, this is this river. Ganga, Kaveri, Krishna, Narmada, Mahanadi, whatever you want. Okay? But it is changing all the time. So you feel your body is the same, your vital is the same, but it is changing all the time. So that is what the Buddhists are saying. There is no fixity at all in the physical world. And you identify itself with it, and behind it is a nihil. So if you are identified with the movement, then you are in ignorance. And if you identify yourself with the nihil, which is behind, which is not changing, you are in knowledge. That's what the Buddhists say. There is experience of knowledge without a knower. experience of being without an existent. Okay, so what is meant by that? Without a knower, because the knower is F. Normally, what we understand by knower is the ego. Nah? When you think that you know something, you are the knower. Okay, you are identifying yourself with the ego, but the ego has gone away. So when you get knowledge in the self, there is no individuality, there is no ego. In a sense, there is no individuality also, because the individuality is now everywhere, like the saltiness in the sea. Okay? So there is experience of knowledge without a knower, experience of being without an existent, because it's an impersonal consciousness. Remember that. The self is not a personal consciousness, it's an impersonal consciousness. You are everywhere. There are simply a number of elements, parts of a flux without a real whole, which combine to create the illusion of a knower and knowledge and the known. In the physical world, there is the knower, that's you, and there is the known, which is the physical world, and the connection between the two is your knowledge. But in the self, you become yourself, the knower, the knowledge, and the known. Because you are a cosmic consciousness, you are the cosmos yourself. So there is no difference between knower, knowledge, and the illusion of an existence and existence, and the experience of existence. So, who is the existent? He is the one, your individual soul, or the Jivatman. And existence is the fact of the physical world being real, but it is impersonal. And the experience of existence. So if you have the experience of the Buddhist, when you go to the self, you can say, or they can conclude that time is the only real existence and they themselves are its creatures. So this is the, you can say in that way, because you have gone to the nihil, okay? You have gone to that which is static. So the only thing that exists is the movement in the physical world. You can think of it in that way. This conclusion of an illusory existence in a real or unreal world, depends on how you are looking at it, is as inevitable to this kind of withdrawal as is the opposite conclusion of a real existence, but an illusory world to which the thinker who, dwelling on the immobile self, observes everything else as a mutable not self. He comes eventually to regard the latter as a result of a deluding trick of consciousness. The deluding trick of consciousness is your Maya. So when you go to the self, many possibilities are there and different philosophies are there. The Buddhists are saying the physical world is unreal. And even if it is real, it is semi-real. That also can be said. Okay. And that is the only thing that exists and nothing else exists. It depends on how you are interpreting the experience. The deluding trick of consciousness is Maya. So that's what you say. So in these two paragraphs, he is telling you that there is a consciousness in which you are identified with your body, mind, life. You are in ignorance. But there is also a consciousness where you are not identified with your body, mind, life. You escape. You stand back and look at yourself objectively. And one day, the standing back will take you out of your body, mind, life. Think of yourself as not the body. That famous shloka of Shankaracharya. Mano buddhi ahankara chittane naham. Then what am I? Chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. I am the pure Brahman consciousness. You go on thinking like that. Na iti, na iti. I am not this, I am not this, I am not this. One day separation will come. That's what he's saying. So he just told you the two different things. When you are in the self, it's in the spirit. When you are in your body, mind, life, it's a physical world and you are in ignorance. So next he will bring in now memory, ego and self-experience. So we stop here today. But let us look a little at the surface consciousness. So he is going to now examine the normal consciousness of man. Okay, not the self. He has told you that there are two consciousness. So he will examine the lower consciousness when you are identified with body, mind, life, and later on he will go to the self and describe the self, experience of the self. Okay? So we stop here today. Au revoir and have a nice day, everybody.